advised.
Well, folks, it's on. The long-awaited moment arrives, the accuser face-to-face with the accused. I'm James Curtis, and this is a special one-hour edition of our exclusive coverage of the Michael Jackson trial. Before the alleged victim, now 15 years old, takes the stand, defense attorney Mesereau has a testy exchange with the boy's brother. Here's how it happened, according to the courtroom transcripts.
Do you remember you told the sheriffs that you looked in the soda can on the plane and saw white wine?
No.
Do you remember you told the sheriffs you looked in the soda can and saw wine?
Yes.
How did you know it was wine?
Because...
If you'd never had a drink before you were on the plane.
I know how it looks, though.
You do?
Yes.
If you look in a soda can?
Yes.
You told the Santa Barbara grand jury that you and your brother were drinking at Neverland between the time you got back from Miami to the time Jesus drove you off the property, right?
I don't remember.
Would it refresh your recollection if I just show you the transcript?
Sure.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. Have you had a chance to look at that page of the grand jury transcript?
Yes.
Has it refreshed your recollection, about what you said?
Yes.
And you did say that you and your brother were drinking alcohol at Neverland between the time you got back from Miami to the time that Jesus drove you off the property, right?
Yes.
And you claim the first drink you ever had was on the plane, and then when you got back, you just kept drinking, right?
Yes.
Next, defense attorney Tom Mesereau pushes this witness to refute his own testimony.
Yesterday, you told the jury the second time you saw Mr. Jackson inappropriately touch your brother, you sneaked up a stairwell, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
You told the Santa Barbara sheriffs in that interview that the second time you saw Mr. Jackson inappropriately touch your brother was on his side, and Mr. Jackson was rubbing against your brother, right?
What? Say it again, please.
Yes, yes. You told the Santa Barbara sheriffs that Mr. Jackson didn't see you. You said that Mr. Jackson started scooting to your brother, that he hugged your brother and kept on scooting. You said he was moving his hips on your brother. And you said your brother was lying on his side, correct?
Yes.
That's not what you told the jury yesterday, is it?
Your Honor, that's argumentative. Sustained.
Do you recall in that interview telling the Santa Barbara sheriffs that you caught Mr. Jackson inappropriately touching your brother on 2 occasions, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, there were 3 times.
Well, that's not what you said before, is it?
Your Honor, that's argumentative, and it's...
Sustained. You told the Santa Barbara sheriffs that Mr. Jackson was masturbating himself and your brother, didn't you?
No.
Well, you were asked the question, what do you mean by masturbating, and what did you see him do? And you said his right hand and his left hand touching my brother. That was your answer to that question, correct?
Well, I was nervous when I was doing the interview.
So because you were nervous, you didn't get the facts right?
Yes.
All right, Sean, isn't he beating up just a little bit on this kid? I mean, after all, this kid, now 14, was only 12 at the time. That's rather young. Nervousness is something that these jurors are going to be able to identify with.
No, I don't think that he's beating up on the kid at all. He's talking about critical inconsistencies. This is the crux of the case, what he saw Michael Jackson do to this boy sexually. If he's telling completely different stories, then it's proper cross-examination. And I think that the judge is wrong to sustain these argumentative objections. They're not argumentative. This is critical cross-examination.
Well, despite those objections being sustained, Howard, the defense attorney just moves on and moves past those. But the idea of inconsistency certainly is a good one, to the extent that one story in a previous grand jury testimony has this same witness on a couch seeing a second incident, and now he's in the stairwell.
There is no doubt this young man has lied. The question is, what did he lie about? How much of his story is credible? Is some believable? Is some really due to lack of recollection? Is other due to intentional misrepresentation and lies? And that's a question for the jury. What will really be interesting is to see what the victim says and how he lines up with the brother.
And we're going to get to that later on, Ricky Kleeman. But isn't really, and I don't want to beat this to death, but isn't it just a little harsh for the word, to use the word rather, lie, when we're talking about a young kid recounting an incident that he's probably had to tell over and over again, when some of the consistencies, at least you can make a good argument, aren't that big?
It's not too harsh to use the word lied, because Tom Mesereau is fighting for the life and liberty of his client, Michael Jackson. And if he believes this youngster lied, he should say lied. However, the real risk here, which means what Howard says, it's up to the jury, is Tom Mesereau is a huge guy.
Yes.
He is big. And this is a small child, even though he's a teenager. And some jurors may, whether it's now or in their recollection of now, weeks or months from now, say, boy, you know, that really wasn't fair. But Tom Mesereau's got to do his job.
He does have to do his job, but later on, as we continue with this testimony, there's some moments where Tom Mesereau, I think, crosses the line. We'll deal with that in just a moment. As we continue, Jackson's attorney, Tom Mesereau, tries to turn the term escape from Neverland into a story of striking contradiction and possible fiction.
Okay. You told the Santa Barbara sheriffs that your family had escaped from Neverland, right?
Yes.
Now, when you say escaped, was that the night you went to Jesus and asked him to drive you in the Rolls Royce to Los Angeles?
No, that was the last time we ever left.
The last time you left, when you were driven by Vinny to your grandparents' house?
Yes.
That was an escape?
Yes.
How many times do you think your family escaped from Neverland and then went back so they could escape again?
I don't get the question.
Yeah, how many times do you recall your family escaping from Neverland?
Object as argumentative, Your Honor.
Overruled. You may answer.
Do you mean us leaving
Well, what do you mean by escape?
the last time?
Okay, I mean, just tell the jury what escape means to you, if you would.
To me?
Yeah,
I don't know how to explain it, but
in your mind. Let me start again. You and your family left Neverland a number of times, right?
3 times, yes.
Okay, how many of those were escapes?
The last one.
Okay, did you ever escape before that?
No.
All right, Ricky, this, I think, goes to prove the point that I was trying to get at. He's using the term escape. He's not an attorney, and he was 12 at the time. Come on. Isn't this a little much?
No. I have to give this one to the defense, because the defense here is using a charge. There's a false imprisonment charge here, which I think is the one charge that probably Thomas Sneddon should not have gone forward with, because it takes us away from the guts of the trial, which is the alleged sexual molestation. So escape, he knows what escape is, plus this family has charged false imprisonment before in another instance.
Well, that may be true, and Howard, that gets me to the point of putting this first charge, the conspiracy charge, which is not conspiracy to molest, it's conspiracy to do other things like falsely imprison with different dates for the molestation. Why is it charged that way?
It is to set the stage. And what's really important about this testimony, it's not about a lie, I think. It's about rehearsal. It's about setting up a scenario. And if I'm Mesereau, what I'm doing is setting up the argument that this was all staged. The word escape was given to these young people.
Now,
and they used it.
And that may, go ahead, Sean.
And actually, I think this is a little argumentative. I disagree with the judge again.
Oh, there you go.
I think this is a little argument. And how many times do you think your family escaped from Neverland before they could escape again? I mean, you know, he's making a point, not really asking a legitimate question.
I think so. But again, in this courtroom, you get away with what you can, as in any courtroom, and those that you can't, you just take the judge's ruling. When we return, Michael Jackson and the alleged victim, accuser and accused, eyeball to eyeball. Stay with us.
The reenactments and commentary in this program may contain frank talk of a sexual nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back. Now the moment everyone has been waiting for. The accuser faces Michael Jackson. Here's just how it happened according to the courtroom transcripts.
Okay. I'm going to have to ask you to lean right into that mic and talk loud so we can all hear what you have to say. All right?
All right.
Do you recognize the defendant in this case?
Yes.
Who is that?
Michael Jackson.
Did you know Mr. Jackson for a while?
Yes.
All right. Gavin, tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, how old are you?
Right now I'm 15 years old.
And what's your date of birth?
December 2nd, 1989.
And can you describe to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what the inside of the place that you lived at on Soto Street was like?
It was like one room, and then we had like a kitchen. There was like a hallway kind of, and we put we had to put all our appliances and stuff in there, and we had one restroom and one closet, so it was like a bachelor apartment.
And where did you sleep in that room?
We slept like, when you would open the door, we would put our bunk beds right there, but then later we didn't have any more bunk beds, and then we all slept on one bed together.
Now, during the time that you were living on Soto Street in your, well, let me ask it this way. At some point, did your father leave?
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I was at my grandmother's house when it happened, but my mom told me that something happened where she wanted to take my sister and my brother to go to like a park or something, and he got angry and he left.
Now, did you ever see your father after that?
No.
All right, I want to give you a quick programming note. We want you to keep in mind that the actor hired for our reenactments of this victim bears no resemblance to the actual accuser. As court continues, DA Tom Sneddon lets the accuser tell his story, a story that anyone can probably sympathize with, especially a juror.
During the time that your mother and father lived together, and you lived with your mother and father, okay?
Uh-huh.
How would you describe the nature of their relationship?
Well, like, they would fight every day about where we lived and, like, bills and whatever.
You got to lean in there.
They would fight about bills and his family and our family. Well, like my mom's mother and father and their cousins and they would fight about his family. You know what I mean.
Did you ever see any physical abuse?
Yeah.
By whom?
My dad would hit my mom sometimes. Like, I saw him one time grab a fire hydrant and my mom tripped over a cart, or those. It was like a black cart that was like about that tall.
What did you use the cart for?
Used it for grocery shopping. It broke really easy, though. And my mom tripped over it because my dad was about to hit her with a fire hydrant.
Do you mean a fire hydrant? Do you mean like...
It was a fire. It was a fire hydrant, about that big, about that tall. They had them in our apartment.
Okay. Were you ever struck by your father?
Yeah.
How many times were you struck?
Well, I was not hit as much as my mom was, but I got hit sometimes.
How about your brothers and sisters?
I saw him hit my brother a lot, like in his head. And my sister sometimes, too. He slapped her.
Sean Chapman Holly, even with your cynicism, this has got to grab you.
Oh, it's very, very sad, very sad. But it demonstrates, I think, a dysfunctional family. And so you have to wonder whether or not these children themselves are dysfunctional, and if the victim is so dysfunctional that he doesn't know what happened and he's making this up.
Well, that's true, but Ricky Kleeman, isn't that, by its very nature, the perfect victim?
Exactly, the perfect victim. And what we find, James, is that in cases of child molestation, many, many times the victims are people who have been abused, or people who are vulnerable, or people who have been in places where they are looking for affection, and therefore the seducer can woo them.
Absolutely. So Howard Weitzman, with this tale of woe, which is true and from all accounts we think accurate, this cannot possibly help the defense.
Well, first of all, there is no perfect victim, in my opinion, I have to say. So it gets back to recollection and credibility. We know kids make things up. However, I've been saying...
Wait. What do you mean? We know kids make things up.
All
kids make things up?
I didn't say that at all. But we know that kids, as a rule, tend to embellish and exaggerate. I said from the beginning of this trial, I want to see these young men testify, because I don't like child molesters. And if this young man is telling the truth, whoever did this to him deserves to be punished. But everybody's out there speculating, and we have to see this young man testify, hear his words, and rely on his recollection. That's what this case is all about.
Well, Ricky, let me see if I can get some alliance from you. I take issue with Howard's statement that we know kids tend to exaggerate. I think kids can be imprecise. But I think the idea, and from what I understand, the idea that kids lie, just as a general rule, is really a myth.
I don't think it's a myth, James, that kids make up stuff. I mean, I don't know if I want to give them the big lie, but all kids make up stuff. I mean, we made up stuff when we were kids, including our imaginary play pals.
Sure.
The question here, though, this is either a big lie or it is the truth. There is no middle ground here. And when Thomas Snedden correctly starts with this boy's upbringing, all of them in this room with the bunk beds and where the appliances in the room, and then the abuse by the father and the hitting of the mother, I mean, this is a boy that you want to believe.
You certainly want to believe and certainly have some sympathy for him, but as Howard points out, will it hold together on cross-examination? As we continue, the accuser's heartbreaking story gets rolled out in front of this jury.
At some point in time, you learned you became ill, correct?
Yes.
And when you became ill, what was the first thing that you realized that something wasn't right with your body?
Well, my stomach was hurting a lot. Like it felt like there was a knife in your stomach, and I couldn't sleep at night. I would put my pillow in my stomach because it really hurt. And then I looked at myself in the mirror and lifted up my shirt, and I saw there was a big bump, like my lower left torso.
Okay.
And my grandmother came, and she saw it, and she told my parents. And a couple of days later, we went to the hospital, and they told me, the doctors were saying, like it's an inflamed spleen, or it's this and that. They weren't really saying it was cancer yet.
When you went to the hospital for the first time and they examined you, did they put you in the hospital on that date?
Yeah. And then I had a surgery that same week on Thursday. So we went there on Monday, I think, and then surgery was on Thursday.
When did you personally learn that you had cancer?
It was before my surgery. They were very open. They didn't try to hide it from me that I had cancer. The surgeons came in and they talked about it, and they said what the cancer was, and they said how they were going to take it out, and they were going to need to take out this. They're going to need to remove the cancer. And then Thursday, they did the surgery. And they didn't just have to take out the cancer, they had to take out my spleen and my left kidney because the cancer was eating away at my spleen and my kidney.
Heart-wrenching. Snedden now sets the stage for how a sick child from a poor family came to meet a superstar like Michael Jackson. Now, the Jamie that you will hear mentioned is Jamie Masada, the owner of a Hollywood comedy club.
Now, during the time that you were in the hospital with cancer, did you ever have a conversation with regard to some people that you would like to meet?
Yeah.
Now, at the time that you asked, you made the request to meet these people. What was your condition at that point in time in terms of whether you thought you were going to live or die?
Well, when I had cancer, I never thought I was going to die. I never even thought about that. I always thought about getting done with the chemo and going to school again. You know what I mean?
Did the doctors tell you something different?
Yeah, there was one time that they thought I was sleeping in my bed, and they were talking to my mother and my biological father. And my doctor told them to prepare for my funeral, and that if the cancer didn't kill me, the chemotherapy would, because the chemotherapy is toxic, and they were giving me adult dosages.
So who did you make the request of to meet some people while you were undergoing cancer treatment?
Jamie.
And who did you ask to see?
Well, I asked, like, every time I would watch Jay Leno's shows, Jay Leno was a really nice comedian, and I always wanted to meet him, and he was like, I thought he was like the coolest comedian.
Anybody else other than Mr. Leno?
Michael.
Okay. Anybody else?
Chris Tucker.
Okay. Were there any others? Were there others that you asked to meet but you didn't meet?
Oh, that I didn't meet? No, I don't think so.
Making a child's wishes come true. Howard Weitzman, it seems that the dynamic of this trial breaks down into one of two areas. Everyone essentially agrees that the mom is not a nice person. She's done some things that are very questionable in her past. But that's not necessarily indicative or proof that this kid is lying, is it?
Absolutely correct. Here's the dilemma, for me at least. As I said earlier, I choose to believe Michael Jackson didn't do this. On the other hand, this is a kid you want to believe because you don't want to think a kid like this young man would get up and lie and make up a story like this. It's a real dilemma.
It's really the reason why Thomas Snedden brought this case. You know, we've criticized him for many reasons about being overzealous because of his long history with Michael Jackson. This young man, with his personal history and his health history and his need to reach out for some comfort when he might die from the disease or die from chemotherapy, that's why Thomas Snedden brought this case, and you understand why he brought it.
And indeed, Sean, if there is support for this testimony in the form of these unindicted co-conspirators, which is a whole nother can of worms, but Other folks, if they can say, who know Michael Jackson, worked with him at the time, this is what happened, or there's reason to believe that this is what happened, the prosecutors got reason to bring this case.
Yes, yes, and I think that this testimony is very important because it rebuts a defense theme, which is that the celebrities were to be grifted. And this provides for the prosecution a very legitimate and very sad reason why celebrities were brought to the boy, because he was sick, he was going to die, and these were his heroes who he wanted to meet. So it's refuting what Mr. Mesereau has brought out in his opening. What the defense theme is, here's the prosecution reason for the celebrities being a part of this family's life.
Absolutely, and perhaps, just perhaps, despite what we've observed essentially and almost unanimously, it pains me to say, as a shaky start by the prosecutor, maybe it's finally gathering some traction. Ahead, Gavin's dreams come true when he hangs out with actor Chris Tucker and gets a call from the king of pop. Stay with us.
The reenactments and commentary in this program may contain frank talk of a sexual nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back. In a story straight out of the movies, the young cancer victim tells the jury how stars like Chris Tucker suddenly made his life a lot more exciting. Here's how it happened, according to the courtroom transcripts.
Tell us what Mr. Tucker did to help you.
He was really close to me. Like, he would always... Like, he took us to the Nickelodeon Awards like 2 years in a row, and he said, well, this is our tradition. We're always going to go to the Nickelodeon Awards. And he got really, like, we were really close. And, like, one night on New Year's, I was feeling really sad because I had to be in the hospital, and I was watching the New Year's stuff. And so I called up Chris and asked him, hey, I just left a message. I didn't really talk to him in person. I said, Chris, man, I need my brother. I don't really have anybody here. And then he didn't call back. But like at 12 o'clock midnight, he was at my hospital. Well, actually, he was in the elevator coming up to my hospital room as New Year's rang out. And then he came up there, and we were like, I was all, oh, Chris. And he brought Aja, his girlfriend, and little Dustin, his baby. And then I didn't think they were going to come because New Year's already rang out and stuff. Like 5 seconds after New Year's, he was in my hospital room. And I was really happy. And I don't know. And he said, well, it's not about looking at when it rings out. It's about being with the people you love. And that's one of the reasons I really like Chris. And I got close to Chris.
Are you friends with Mr. Tucker anymore, or currently?
Well, I don't know if he still wants to be my friend, but no, I haven't called him in a while, and he hasn't called me, and we haven't really talked in a while.
Why?
I don't know, I guess because of all of this stuff.
Next, a phone call from a godlike figure changes this boy's life.
Gavin, at some point in time, did you have some contact with the defendant in this case, Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Would you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how that happened?
I'm not sure who exactly got Michael to call me, but one night, it was either Jamie or this lady named Carol Lemire. One day when I was in the hospital, Michael called me up. Well, someone called me up, and I was like, who's this?
Lean into the microphone, please.
Someone called me up in my hospital room, and I asked who was this, and then they said that they were Michael Jackson.
And did you believe them?
Well, yeah.
And how long did the conversation last?
That was a pretty short conversation. It was only about like 5 minutes long.
Now, did you have other conversations with Mr. Jackson?
Yeah.
How many do you think you had? Let me ask you this. Let's do it this way. At some point in time, were you invited to go to Mr. Jackson's ranch at Neverland Valley Ranch?
Yeah.
Between the time you received the first telephone call from the person identifying themselves as Michael Jackson until you went to the ranch, how many calls did you think you had between you and Mr. Jackson?
There was only one call, because the first time that he called me, he invited me up to the ranch, said he wanted me to come down.
Were you undergoing chemotherapy at this time?
Yes, I was in the middle of a round of chemotherapy.
During this conversation with Mr. Jackson, was a date set for you folks to go there, or how was it that the date was set for you to go?
He just said that he wanted me to come down, and then I'm not sure how it got set up, but he was telling me about my cancer and talked to me about that he wanted me to go to his ranch and stuff like that. I don't know how I got set up to go up there. I think they talked to my parents or something.
During the time that you had cancer, did you have other telephone calls with Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Could you give us an estimate of how many calls that you had from him?
I don't know, like 20, maybe 20 calls.
Were some of them quite lengthy?
Yeah.
Were they all in the hospital?
No.
Where were you when you had other calls with Mr. Jackson?
My grandma's house.
Sean, two things I want to start out with. First of all, the start of this case. This witness is good. Again, we haven't heard the cross, but this testimony is very compelling. What do you think about a prosecution team starting with this kind of testimony?
I think that would have been a wise move on Mr. Snedden's part, given that we've seen two bad witnesses, the brother and sister. And because the brother and sister were so bad, it calls me at least to call into question the credibility of this witness simply because his brother and sister lacked credibility.
But is that really a fair comment, though?
Well,
yes.
No.
You think so? All right, let's have it. Go ahead.
Well, I've said from day one I would have liked to have seen the victim on the stand first. And by the way, I think there were 4 poor witnesses, not 2. I think Bashir was horrendous, and he stood on the
First Amendment
shield law. I think the public relations witness was horrendous, and then the brother and sister. This young man could have and would have set the stage.
And set the tone for this trial, the dynamic trial.
Cross-examination would have been very different.
Yeah. I think that one of the things that a good prosecutor has to do, as well as a good defense lawyer, is think about the orchestration of a case. Yes. It's how you put on the witnesses. In what order? Do you build to a crescendo and then go down? It was high risk to start with the accuser, very high risk. What if he wasn't ready? What if he didn't do so well? So
maybe he was real nervous, hadn't started yet.
I think what Snedden did were 2 things. Number one was he wanted to get the other siblings to give us the context, and for better or for worse, they were good on direct and bad in cross. No surprise. Yeah. But also, he wanted to set it up with the Bashir documentary because he wanted to show how this whole thing happened.
Sure.
So I think Snedden's idea was a good one. The fact that they didn't fall so well when it came to cross-examination, that's a chance he took.
But the timing, the Bashir documentary, the beginning of the case, but according to the prosecution team, the molestation doesn't happen until after the Bashir documentary airs. Well, testimony continues with the accuser's first visit to a magic place called Neverland.
Now, you said that you were invited by Mr. Jackson to go up to his ranch?
Uh-huh.
And had you ever heard of Mr. Jackson's ranch prior to that?
No. After when he, called me and said ranch, I thought it was like a ranch with horses.
So how did you get up to the ranch?
There was a limousine that came to my grandma's house, and then we went up in a limousine.
And who went up there?
It was me, my mom, my biological father, my sister, my brother, and me.
And do you remember about, was it daylight or was it dark when you got there?
It was daylight.
And do you remember what happened when you first got there?
Yeah. I guess they told Michael we were up there already, and he had a bib on because he was eating, and then he ran out and he greeted us, and he had, a red shirt on, a black tie.
All right. Did you have any conversation with Mr. Jackson at that time during the greetings?
Well, he just said hi to us because he had to go do something.
So where did you go after Mr. Jackson went to do something?
I think we ate.
All right.
I guess.
What did you do after that?
We went and saw the unit that he put us in, and then they were afraid, my dad was kind of afraid of putting me on rides because he thought maybe because of my surgery I might, rupture something or whatever. And then, but I eventually talked him into letting me go on rides, and we started going on rides and stuff.
At the amusement park?
Yeah, at the ranch.
Howard, I got to back up to something we heard a moment ago. When he talks about Chris Tucker visiting him on New Year's Eve, it seems, we don't know this definitively yet, but it seems that this kid is alone in a hospital room on New Year's Eve?
It's kind of consistent with the portrait that we have been given of the parents. But also makes this witness more sympathetic, and I think might lend a little bit to his credibility.
And more sympathetic, more likely to be a victim, Ricky?
More sympathetic, more likely to be a victim, especially when we get to this part of the testimony. This is his first moment of meeting Michael Jackson, and he's in this amusement park, and he's afraid to go, or his father's afraid for him to go on rides because he might get hurt, and he gets to go on. I mean, the joyfulness of this moment in his life, which according to the prosecution is then ripped away from him by Jackson turning out, allegedly, to be a child molester.
And that's certainly the issue. Sean?
I completely agree. It's very, very sad. You called me a cynic before, and this really...
You are a cynic, Sean.
It really, really touched me. You do want to believe this victim.
And we're going to see how it plays out when we get to that crucial cross-examination. We still continue with the direct for now. When we return, the sleeping arrangements at Neverland and the accuser's story takes the dark twist.
The reenactments and commentary in this program may contain frank talk of a sexual nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back. From the mouth of the accuser, the jury hears how a young cancer patient's dream come true begins to resemble a nightmare. Here's how it happened, according to the courtroom transcripts.
All right. When you were at Neverland Ranch, was there ever an occasion where you slept in Mr. Jackson's room with Mr. Jackson?
Yeah.
Would you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how it came about that you ended up sleeping with Mr. Jackson in his bedroom?
I think we were in his office. We were all talking.
Who's we?
Me, my brother, and Michael. We were all in his office and we were talking, and then Michael said we should sleep in his room, and then I was like, okay, yeah, because we were like wanted to sleep in his room too, and then he told us to ask in front of our parents if we could sleep in his room. So I think it was like at dinner we asked our parents if we could sleep in Michael's room, and then so we did, and then my parents said yeah, it was okay.
And next, according to the accuser, the tour of Neverland becomes a tour of something much more sinister.
Now, at some point that night then, you go into Mr. Jackson's bedroom?
Yes.
What were you doing in there? Do you recall?
Well, it started out like we were going to watch some Disney cartoons and a bunch of these videotapes of The Simpsons, and then Frank Tyson had a computer. I don't remember whether it was my computer or his computer in there.
Okay. Tell us what happened.
And then he set up the computer, and then Frank started doing stuff on the internet, and then they started looking up like adult material sites.
Where was Mr. Jackson there?
Yeah.
Was Mr. Jackson involved in that?
Yes.
And in what way?
Well, he was like pointing out girls like, oh, I like her, and then, but I mean, he wasn't typing, Frank was typing.
So how long do you think, how many different sites do you think you went to?
Maybe like 7 sites. We didn't go to that many sites.
And how long do you think you were doing this?
I don't know, maybe like 15, 30 minutes, something like that.
I couldn't hear you.
I think maybe like 15, 30 minutes or something.
And you described it as adult materials. Can you tell us whether it was male or female?
It was female.
Can you tell us about the age, in your estimation, the age of the females that you saw?
Maybe like 15 to like 25 years old.
Now, during the time that you were in the room going through these sites on the computer, did Mr. Jackson say anything?
Yeah.
Tell the jury what he said.
Like one time we were like looking at the site and there was this girl with her shirt up, and Michael says like it was all quiet and stuff, and Michael was like, got milk, and we started laughing because he said that.
Okay. Did he say anything else?
Like Paris and Prince were sleeping in his bed, and then Michael leaned over to Prince in his ear and he said, Prince, you're missing all the P-U-S-S-Y.
Did he spell it?
No.
All right, Ricky Kleeman, corroboration with the other witnesses on the point of what they were looking at, the magazines and the internet.
Well, corroboration all the way, and this really is a moment that's either very adolescent or really disgusting. Yeah. Because you have Michael Jackson. We have to remember he's with these children. They're children at the time. They're not even, here he's 15 now. We're going back not only to the documentary in 2003, we're going back before that when they first met. And you've got Frank Tyson in there typing up these dirty little sites and Michael Jackson making inappropriate remarks, if this is all true. And because Jackson's in the room, we understand now why Frank Tyson is part of the unindicted co-conspirator group.
Exactly. Frank Tyson, we should note, is a Jackson, or at least was at that time, a Jackson 8 and an unindicted co-conspirator. Howard, corroboration or something inconsistent with being a pedophile?
Well, first of all, it's not inconsistent. If this is true, Michael Jackson deserves to be convicted, in my opinion. This is bad, bad conduct.
But it ain't child molestation.
No. But
at this point,
it begins to lend foundation and credence to what the brother said. What I find really fascinating here, and you talk about corroboration, it's really the reverse, which is why I would have put this witness on first. This witness appears to be a strong witness on direct. They've all appeared to be somewhat good, but this witness seems strong. And if he could have withstood cross-examination as the first witness setting the stage, everything else would have fallen into place.
All right, Sean, you're going to be up next with how the defense deals with this powerful testimony as the accuser is asked about the infamous Bashir documentary that Chris referred to as actor Chris Tucker.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about Martin Bashir. Were you introduced to a person by the name of Martin Bashir?
Yes.
And where were you introduced to the person by the name of Martin Bashir?
In Michael's living room, in his main house.
And who introduced you to Mr. Bashir?
Michael.
Now, how did you get to the ranch?
I think Chris drove me up that time, and then in his bus.
And did any other members of your family go with you?
It was only me, my sister, and my brother.
And did you know why you were going to the ranch?
Michael wanted me to go up there, and then I think I called Chris because I would always tell him that we never went up there, like, together. We'd never been at the ranch together with Chris. He would go up there one time, and I would be at home, and then I would go up, and then he would be at home. So we said that we'd all go there together. So we all went up there, and Chris took us up there.
Did you have any other conversations with Mr. Jackson?
Yeah, that's when he introduced me to Martin Bashir.
Any other conversation with Mr. Jackson?
Yeah, like, he introduced me to Martin Bashir, and then he took me, I think it was in the library where he took me, and then he was telling me, hey, you want to be an actor, right? And I was like, yeah, I want to be a comedian, though. And then he was like, but you can act too, right? And then I was like, yeah, well, I'm going to put you in the movies, and this is your audition, okay? And I was like, oh, all right. And he told me, okay, I want you to go in and then tell them about how I helped you. And he told me to, like, make sure, tell them about, like, this and that, and about that you call me Dad or Daddy.
So, was this accuser being manipulated by Michael Jackson? That certainly seems what D.A. Sneddon hopes these jurors hear.
What did he tell you to say on the videotape?
He told me to say that he helped me and that he pretty much cured me of cancer.
Did you do that? On the video?
Yeah.
Was it true?
Not really, because during my cancer, he wasn't really even there.
When you went up to the Bashir video,
yeah,
to the Bashir interview, okay?
Uh-huh.
Did you admire Mr. Jackson?
Yeah, I was like...
What was your attitude towards Mr. Jackson at this point in time?
I thought, like, he was the coolest guy in the world. He was like my best friend ever. Do you know what I mean?
So you had a genuine affection for Mr. Jackson at this time?
Yeah, I really liked him.
Sean Chapman Holly, where is the defense ammunition for this witness?
The defense ammunition is going to be, I would presume, on inconsistent statements that he's given before. He's given a number of statements to the grand jury, I presume,
yes,
to the psychiatrist, to social workers, and I guarantee you that he's given a number of inconsistent statements. The question is going to be what we talked about before, whether they're critical or whether they're small things.
Exactly, and that the idea, Howard, is going to be driven home when we get to that part, but let's take what we have now before us. This testimony, good and strong for the prosecution without much apparent defense openings.
Well, I don't agree that this is good and strong for the prosecution. I just think it is what it is. As a matter of fact, it makes sense that Michael Jackson would try to do something to rebut that edited, diced, and spliced Bashir documentary.
It does make sense, but Ricky, this kid says we didn't know that this was going to be a documentary in the sense of shown in this country, let alone around the world. This is some home video as far as this kid's concerned.
Well, taking the defense side here, I can see Michael Jackson's talking to a youngster and says, come on, you want to be an actor, this is your audition. I don't have any problem with that.
All right, when we return, the question becomes befriended or betrayed. Stay with us.
reenactments and commentary in this program may contain frank talk of a sexual nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back. The accuser's first day on the stand covers a lot of ground, including a video that's at the heart of the case. And just how honest was Michael Jackson with the young boy? Here's how it happened, according to the courtroom transcripts.
Now, did you know at the time that Mr. Bashir was interviewing you with Mr. Jackson, the defendant in this case, did you know that that video was going to be shown around the world?
No, not at all. I thought it was another thing like he had filmed before, like him carrying me across the bridge, that video. I thought it was going to be another thing like that, like he was going to, like, put it away somewhere and keep it just for himself.
All right, Fox News is reporting that, again, money woes reign in the Michael Jackson camp. Is this just much ado about nothing, rehashing the same old stuff? Who wants to take it?
Well, you know what? They must mean cash flow, because there is a revenue stream for Michael that comes off his assets and some of what and the publishing and catalog that he owns.
Sure. Now, if indeed, let's just play this out for just a moment, there is a cash flow issue, does that affect Mesereau's representation? Does it affect the defense attorney?
Not a whit. He's in for a penny, in for a pound. He is there to finish. He's a committed lawyer. Hopefully, for his sake, he got much of his money up front. But, whatever is left out there that he doesn't receive, he is not walking away.
All right, let's get back into this testimony, Sean, with respect to what we've heard so far. And again, we know the cross-examination is indeed coming, but what we have so far, it's hard to keep it contained, Sean, but I'm going to give it my best shot. What we have so far, strong for the prosecution or not?
What we have so far is strong for the prosecution. This is a good witness. This is a sad story. Michael Jackson seems like a very bad guy. But I have to remind you that we felt this way about the brother and the sister, and on cross-examination, it was all turned around. So I don't think we can really evaluate this witness until after the cross-examination.
And you still believe, Sean, do you not, that because of the problems of the sister and the brother, it spills over onto this witness?
It definitely does, because all of these children are under the influence in some way of this dysfunctional family, the mother and the father. I'm going to be real surprised if this mother takes the stand. She's got some real problems. I wonder if Mr. Sneddon is going to make what I would think is a mistake of putting the mother on the stand.
Well, if Mr. Sneddon doesn't, Mr. Mesereau will. This mother's going to be on the stand, and we know that Tom Mesereau is laying in wait for her because he really knows he has plenty of ammunition. The most difficult task for Mesereau in this entire trial is how to cross-examine young Gavin, the accuser. Because we have to remember that he's either lying, it's all a lie, or it is the truth, or most of it is the truth. And you do have someone who was a young cancer patient who was very, very vulnerable to seduction.
Howard?
Well, as I said earlier, you want to believe this kid, and yet you don't want to believe Michael Jackson would do something like this.
Some people don't.
Well, I mean,
some people are ready to believe.
You're right. But this is what makes trials really fascinating. Because we don't know. We're all guessing and speculating, and 12 people who don't have the same point of view that we have are going to make the determination as to what they want to believe and who they want to believe.
One thing, James, that's been reported from people in the courtroom is that this witness has acted, quote-unquote, very appropriately. His affect is appropriate. He doesn't seem rehearsed.
Although there was a report about a sneer toward Michael Jackson.
There was a report about a sneer from the Associated Press that's been carried, but a sneer when he identifies him. No surprise if he were really molested.
All right, we're going to have to leave it right there. Now, don't forget, we'll be here tomorrow at 9 p.m. with a can't-miss one-hour edition of our exclusive Michael Jackson trial coverage. Michael Jackson not present when court began, and the judge not amused. That will be part of our exclusive reenactments only on E! See you tomorrow.